Welcome. My name is Jill Jonathan, and I'm with Red Wine and Blue. We are a community of women who use digital media and friend to friend organizing to change the world one suburb at a time. And one way we do that is through conversation. So we love to have conversations on TikTok, IG, Facebook, you name it. We love having conversations about what's going on in the world. And today we have a very exciting guest, Scott Stewart. So I see that he's here. Hey, oh, maybe. We had him for a second. Let's try that again. Thank you. It looks like he's getting back on here. There he is. Hi, Scott.
Am I on?
Yes.
It seems really choppy. Sorry,
Oh, no.
sorry, let me just check my connection. Just one sec,
Okay.
sorry.
And for anybody who doesn't know, Scott is actually in Australia, and I'm in Ohio. So we're trying to make this work. So it could take a little while.
Is-
I can see you and hear you okay. All right. We'll see if he comes back on. Okay, here he goes. Okay, can
ha-
you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, all good.
Fantastic.
Okay, good. And we've got Scott, and I have to say, I was watching some of your videos, and I noticed the Mr. Rogers poster behind you, and I am a
Oh,
fan of
yeah.
Mr. Rogers, so I noticed that. So very cool. So anyway, like I was saying, Red, White, and Blue, we're a community of women who use digital media, friend-to-friend organizing to change the world one suburb at a time. We talk about books a lot. And I don't know how Australia is, but the US, there's some really super crazy things happening here. And you do so much incredible work, so I want to get into that. But I just want to start with what really made the news here is that you wrote this book called My Purple is Shadow, and it is beautiful. It is a beautiful story. And a teacher in Georgia bought the book from a scholastic book fair at her own school, shared it with a classroom. The kids voted on what book they wanted her to read, and they wanted her to read that book. She read the book. There was a writing exercise. It sounds like the kids really connected to the book. And it was just a lovely day in the classroom until a parent complained, and now that teacher is fired. So
Yeah.
that's just my first question. Like, I know you wrote this book to be a beautiful story as it is, and what is your reaction to hearing that a teacher is fired over reading the story?
Honestly, it's kind of hard to reconcile that this is real life. I mean, it's 2023 and somebody's being fired over reading a book. It's completely crazy. Yeah, so I've spoken to Katie a few times and kind of followed the whole story. And everything about it just kind of gets worse as it goes along. I mean, she was fired. It went to a tribunal. The tribunal said, maybe she shouldn't be fired. We don't recommend that. And then she's fired anyway. It's ridiculous. The fact that books are the thing that we're worried about in 2023 is wild enough as it is, let alone that it's books that are just inclusive, accepting of other people, and trying to make a difference, making people feel seen. It's ridiculous. It's gross. It's disgusting. It's crazy. Yeah.
It really is. And then, so you have another book called My Shadow is Pink.
Yep.
And you have a short film about it, which I watched this morning, and it brought me to tears. I mean, they're just beautiful books that I feel like all of us, like even as adults, like we can read and relate to it. So what was your motivation of writing these books, and what were you hoping to happen? Obviously, you weren't hoping a teacher would be fired over reading it, but where did you get your motivation, and why did you write these books?
So my shadow is pink came from my son when he was about 3, 4 years old. His absolute favorite character was Queen Elsa, and he used to, he had all the dresses, the costumes, he had every toy on earth, and this was before he'd even seen the movie. Eventually he did see the movie and then fell even more in love with Elsa. And there was just a little bit of judgment. There was judgment from some external parties, and eventually it kind of led to this one day where he was really upset about something somebody had said, and it kind of led me to look for books that were about a young boy who likes things like Elsa, and I couldn't really find any, and so I sat down. I wrote the first draft of what became My Shadow is Pink. It wasn't a shadow, it wasn't even pink at the first draft level, but I wrote that in one night, and then I spent a good 4 years, working on it, trying to, resolve the story and eventually get it published. And then when that was published, I was doing a lot of readings, with a group of kids and stuff like that. And usually I was the one who was reading it. And after I would read, I'd always say, what color is your shadow? And the kids instinctively would know that it's not just blue or pink. They would say, my shadow is yellow, my shadow is, gold with a sparkly unicorn horn, and, all sorts of things. And I was attending this one reading where I wasn't the person reading the book. It was somebody else doing the reading, and I was just kind of like watching on. And they read the book, and then at the end they said, okay, what color is, everybody, what color is your shadow? Is it blue or is it pink? And I remember thinking, you've just completely limited all these kids to these two options, and that's not even reflective of reality. And so that was that initial momentum to create My Shadow is Purple.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And what a beautiful story. And so, what kind of feedback have you been getting from teachers and kids and people who have read the book?
Yeah, I mean, look, from teachers, from kids, from 99% of parents, it's really beautiful feedback. It's things like, I had never seen myself in a book before, and now I do. It's teachers saying that they were able to have these really beautiful, constructive conversations around gender and gender stereotypes, and these books gave the platform to do that. So the feedback from those levels has been amazing. And like I said, 99% of parents, it's been really constructive, because I didn't want these books to be prescriptive in any way, like here's how you should raise your child. I wanted them to be a conversation opener. Gender and things like that generally aren't, the first topic of conversation, with your kids. And so having these books gives you the opportunity to talk about your shadow, to talk about the thing that makes you you and how you feel about yourself. So to open those conversations has been just so fantastic. I get emails all the time from parents, but there has been a little bit of negativity, as you can imagine, which you kind of alluded to before, but overwhelmingly 99% is all just absolutely beautiful feedback.
Yeah, and were you surprised then when you heard the story of Katie Renderly, the teacher in Georgia, being fired over this book? Was that a surprise to you?
Is surprise the right word? Look, this was about the 7th or 8th thing I'd seen, specifically in the USA, about the book being brought up at a town council meeting to be removed from libraries, and so I'd seen a lot of these things, and so, pardon me, when I saw that Katie had been fired for reading the book, I don't know if I was necessarily surprised, but I was shocked. one of the struggles of today is that it's getting increasingly common to have completely overblown and inappropriate, response to books that are just accepting and inclusive. And so, yeah, I don't know if I was surprised, but it certainly blew me away that, especially that one parent complaining could have so much power. I don't think that here in Australia we have that much power. As a parent, if I have an issue with something happening in my son's classroom, I can go and talk to the teacher. I can, say I don't like something. I can take my son out of class for a lesson that I don't want him taught. But if I go and complain about the teacher and say she should be fired, I think I would just get laughed at. I think nobody would take that seriously here. But it feels like there's so much power given to a parent who doesn't like something being taught in classrooms in the US, specifically a conservative parent. That seems to be where all the power seems to lie. It just kind of blows my mind. Yeah.
It is, and it's scary. And I saw Kristen, who works with us, she said that's the way it used to be here. And that's what I feel like too. Yeah. So I have two kids in school. One is a freshman in high school, one's a sixth grader. And the last couple years have been very different for us, for sure.
Is this something that's like, it's gotten worse over the years? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely has gotten worse, and I think a lot of people are surprised. And at Red, Wine, and Blue, we're trying to open it up to kind of shake people awake. Look what's happening. This is happening at your local school district, and that's where people can have power. Us, locally, we can go to those school board meetings, we can speak up, we can vote for candidates who really care about the kids. But a really concerning thing for us is just the fear that it's going to create in teachers. And I've interviewed multiple authors as well. And every author I've interviewed, they're like, "Oh no, I'm not going to stay quiet." They're like, "It's not going to scare me. I'm going to still write what I want to write." But teachers and librarians, just the fear around them, and just second guessing, maybe a book they've been reading for years to their classroom, just that second guessing. And I'm just curious, as someone who writes and who's a creator, is that something that's going to stop you, or is that something that concerns you, that the people who've been using, what you're writing might not use it as much anymore?
It's definitely not going to stop me writing stories, but it is extremely concerning that things are being completely misinterpreted. Like my book, one of my books, My Shadow is Purple, one of the reasons, I've forgotten which, attempt at banning it was, but it was being listed as pornography.
Oh my God.
And it's just it's so out there that I don't even know how to respond to that, because it's just so wildly untrue. And that seems to be the thing. We had our biggest, most high-profile kind of book banning thing here in Australia was actually quite recently, and it was a book called Welcome to Sex, and it's for teenagers, and it's basically written by an author and some doctors, with tons of medical help, and it's basically an introduction to sex and consent, and here's what this thing means. And the whole thing is the more they know, the less they do, and the less they kind of struggle, and I know, and the less they have shame, and all those sorts of things. And we had a huge moment here in Australia where a content creator took the book from its location in a bookstore, took it to the children's picture book section, and then started filming, saying this is what they're teaching 3-year-olds, like a book about sex for 3-year-olds with graphic illustrations and stuff. And so it kind of blew up here, and it's completely untrue, like the way that it is framed. And that seems to be the path, is to completely misframe the book, or the books, to get them banned, because I think even the people trying to ban the books realize that there's not enough there to ban them, and so they have to mischaracterize them. But yeah, no, it definitely won't stop me writing books. It has changed the way I interact with live readings. So my son used to come to a lot of my book readings at libraries and things like that. I don't bring him anymore, especially after I had one where there was a massive self-identified, I know this word is like losing its power at the moment because it's used so much, but self-identified neo-Nazis like protesting, out the front, and had to cancel the event and stuff. So I don't bring my son to those things anymore. So it has changed, and I need to be a lot more thoughtful and prepared before I enter those spaces and things like that now. But no, it definitely doesn't stop me. I don't think it stops any author. In fact, I think it just makes us want to create more. So
that's what I feel like. And I feel like, most of us are like, yes, we want more. And the kids are like that too. They want to read more. And so, I don't know if you can even answer this, but why do you think some people, very few people, feel very threatened by books like this, by My Shadow is Purple, My Shadow is Pink? Why would anyone feel threatened by that? What are you seeing?
I think a couple of things. I think that especially books around that somehow touch on the LGBTQ community. For a long time, that community has been portrayed in media, but they've been portrayed in a way where they are the butt of the joke, or completely kind of misrepresenting them. And now that we are presenting that community in a way that asks for respect, and presenting them in an accurate way, suddenly that's that's too much,
You've taken it too far now.
Yeah, well, what do you mean I don't laugh at them? So like that is a big shift in media. We've gone from, movies that I loved, The Birdcage, where it is, laughing at, these people, to now movies and books where we say, well, this is how this experience is, and so that's a big part of it. This idea that, like, I even hear from people I know, which blows my mind that it's an offline experience too, that people I know, they said to me, I was talking to some people the other day, they said, I've been trying to find something to watch on Netflix, but everything's just trying to turn everybody gay. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And they're like, well, everything's got an agenda. I was like, are we watching the same Netflix? Like, what are you talking about? So there's that aspect. There's this idea that because, and it's only like 5% of media, is even inclusive, but now that 5% is actually asking for respect, it's like, whoa, this is way too much, and then the other aspect, which I don't think gets talked about enough, is there is an enormous business in misinformation and driving outrage, especially on the internet. There's an enormous amount of attention. There's tons of advertising dollars that are up for grabs, to be the bigot online, basically. I know how easy it is to drive massive amounts of views by portraying things inaccurately and saying that it's hurting kids. It's instant instant views, and so I think that's something that we aren't really taking seriously at the moment, because that's what's driving so much of this, is that people can like stick a book in the wrong section saying here's what they're writing for kids, instantly get millions of views and attention on media and all that sort of stuff. And I don't think we are doing enough to combat that. All we're doing really at the moment is saying, well, it's not true, this is what the book is, and I think we need to be actively fighting that. Yeah.
What do you have any ideas of things that we can be doing? I can name some things that Red, Wine, and Blue is doing, but I'm curious, like what ideas you would have.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is finding ways to steal the views yourself, because attention goes somewhere, and it's either going to go to ridiculously like misinformed stuff, or it's going to go to really well produced, really engaging content around that. I think that's a big part. One of the things that I struggle with is often when there's misinformation and just kind of offensive stuff being created, we often move away from that space. Like I remember when Joe Rogan, there was a lot of talk around Joe Rogan on Spotify, tons of like really inclusive people and podcasts and stuff said, well, we're going to remove ourselves. I'm like, that just gives more voice to them. And I understand it's kind of that like, well, I don't want to be there, but instead we need to drown that out, But I don't know, there's a million things that we can do and there's also nothing at the same time, So it's an unbelievably challenging thing to deal with.
It is, and I think just by like what you're telling me and other writers I talk to of like, you're not going to silence me, I'm going to keep writing and doing what I do. And Red, Wine, and Blue, I just have to talk about, like, we have this banned bookmobile kit that you can actually order from our website, and we'll send you a kit of banned books and like a magnet you could put on your car, and so you can go and like distribute banned books to your community. Yeah. So we're like trying to make it fun and interesting at the same time, even though we understand the seriousness of it.
Isn't it wild that, like, I know when I was a kid, so I'm 39, when I was a kid, just the idea of a book banning was like World War II. Like, that's, right. We've moved past that now, and to think that that's today, like we're kind of returning to that idea, and to even have to have a book ban, like mobile or vehicle, whatever you called it, is it's wild. I love that.
It is. I never imagined being in this area, and then also I feel like one of my motivations of like speaking up and using my voice is that I'm hoping like years from now we'll look back on this time and be like, that was really crazy.
That was crazy.
And I want my kids to be like, but I remember my mom, she said stuff, she spoke up, she did something. So I think that's what we're all trying to do. But to go a little more like positive route, I'm just so curious, especially seeing like the Mr. Rogers poster behind you and just like the work that you do. I'm assuming he has a great influence on you, and I'm just curious, like, what made you start writing children's books?
It's funny because that poster was actually a gift from my wife, and we didn't have Mr. Rogers in Australia growing up, and so I only really learned about him as an adult, and became really interested as an adult and became a fan as an adult. So I kind of had the opposite experience to most people. Sorry, what was the second half of the question?
Just what made you start writing children's books?
So, look, I think I'm a reasonably stereotypical author in that I remember when I was 8 years old, I was asked, what do you want to be? And I said an author. And so I did the next obvious author thing. I didn't write anything for 22 years. And I was an excellent procrastinator. I kind of likened it to, like, I really want to have run a marathon. I haven't run one. I really, really want to have run a marathon. But I want to have done that in the past. I don't really want to run a marathon in the present And that's what it was with being an author. I wanted to be an author already. I wanted to have written these books, but the idea of sitting down and writing, it just wasn't really for me. And then when my son was born, I wasn't allowed to stay at the hospital. I had to go home, and I remember lying there in bed. I couldn't sleep, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool if he grew up and there was a book, like just with his name in it, like, a book about him doing something? Just wouldn't that be fun? And so I wrote this book. It's a terrible book, but it was like my first book, and I just had so much fun writing it, and then I wrote another one, and I decided to try and self-publish that, and I just loved every single part of the process. And I remember my wife saying to me, she's like, are you going to keep writing? Are you enjoying it? Do you want to, like, what if you never sell anything? And I said, honestly, I don't really care if I don't sell anything, because I'm just loving, like, the process of creating these books. And that's kind of what stuck with me. I am very fortunate to have been able to be a full-time author for a few years, and I just absolutely cannot think of a better way of spending my day than waking up and writing books. So yeah, I love it. In terms of writing around kind of this subject, I guess it's something that's really similar to my social media, in that I was never planning on sharing the journey of my son, liking things that we've kind of culturally deemed feminine. And then one day my wife said to me, she said, Scott, there's probably a lot of people out there, a lot of kids out there who are similar to our son, who didn't have a supportive dad. Wouldn't it be nice if they could look online and there's a supportive dad, or like read a book and there's like, a dad being supportive? Well, when you put it like that, I mean, it's it's hard to ignore that. So that's what kind of gave me the impetus to start sharing online. And that's one of the things that is always in my head as I'm writing, something where I'm like, especially when you hit that kind of valley of, you start writing a book and like, I'm the best writer ever, this book's going to be the greatest thing on earth. And then like a week later, when you're really stuck in the like, I am the worst author that has ever walked the face of this planet. This book is trash. One of the things that kind of keeps me going is, man, wouldn't it be cool, for this to exist in the world? Sometimes, especially coming from a dad, and a lot of people didn't have that kind of dad growing up. So.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm just thinking of My Shadow is Pink, the short film that you have that you can see on your website, of the dad with the big blue shadow behind him, and just like a little more macho looking and then softening up to his son. It's such a beautiful thing.
That and the book, they were really, that's the story of my son and I, I would love to come on and say, when my son first wanted to wear an Elsa dress, I was like super supportive, and but I wasn't. It made me uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable because I'd grown up in wildly rigid gender roles, and a really, really rigid idea of what masculinity was. And so I had to kind of go through this journey of, like, I never said no to him in terms of him being able to wear, an Elsa dress or anything like that. But I was feeling really uncomfortable, and I had to go through a whole kind of journey of learning about myself, overcoming some of the stuff that I grew up with, some of the traumas I had growing up, and learning how not to project that onto my son. And that's kind of what My Shadow is Pink is.
Yeah, I'm like, you just described parenthood, really.
Yeah.
Like, it is. Like, it's teaching a lot of things that you, like, have to, reconcile with yourself. I definitely relate to that. So before we go in a couple of minutes, I just want to hear about your latest book that you've come out with. I think it's a bedtime story book. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, would usually have a copy here somewhere. It's called Bedtime Stories for Hard Days, and it's a collection of poems. Here it is, Bedtime Stories for Hard Days. And it's a collection of poems designed for a parent to read to their child on those trickier days, those days where your child is feeling sad, is feeling anxious, can't sleep, they're feeling like their best isn't good enough, they're feeling like they're not being accepted for who they are, and these are poems specifically written for those moments. And it really came about because I had been this idea of bedtime stories, I had initially kind of in my head called it bedtime stories for difficult days, but it's bedtime stories for hard days. And I had initially had this thought of, wouldn't it be nice to have a bedtime story for just different kinds of days that we have? Like a bedtime story for the day that like you and your kid are just like, inseparable and everything's happening perfectly. And then a bedtime story written for that day where you've been arguing and nothing's working. And so then one day, just on Instagram or TikTok or somewhere, somebody wrote this comment, could you write a bedtime story for my son or my daughter, maybe, I've forgotten who's been having a really hard day. And so I wrote this one poem. I put it up online. There was a lot of interest. A lot of publishers kind of reached out, and I have eventually turned it into this whole thing. And yeah, it comes out here in Australia in 2 weeks, and then in America and globally, I think in February, March, somewhere around there. So,
can you pre-order it?
You can, yes, okay. Absolutely. Pre-order, yeah.
That's a good thing. I have heard writers are like, yes, pre-order the book. That helps.
Yeah, I mean, pre-ordering, I never really thought of it as an important thing. And then as I have had more books come out, I think this is my 10th book. As I've had each kind of book come out, I've realized, the more pre-orders are, the more bookstores actually stock it and all that sort of stuff. So I'm super proud of it. I'm super proud of the illustrations. Look at those bunnies that I just had a fantastic time drawing. I kind of wanted to do something that was a little bit outside my comfort zone in terms of illustration and creation. And funnily enough, that's what I had in my head. And I've seen all the early reviews of it, and they're all like, this book is so Scott Stuart. I'm like, oh, okay, is it? All right, great. So it's kind of funny how we have sometimes we can't see our own style, but other people can. So
yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. Like I said, my kids are a little bit older, but I think I could probably benefit from that book too. So it's like,
well, it's funny. One of the things that's really happened, especially on Instagram, is a lot of adults kind of listening to them. I mean, obviously because it's social media. I mean, having said that, half my son's class has social media. But a lot of adults are listening to it, to the stories, and saying how it's just really healing for them to hear these things as a grown-up. I mean, when was the last time someone read you to bed?
Exactly.
And it's one of those things that I know there's a moment where our kids are like, I don't want that anymore. But when you do it, it's the best thing ever, and they love it. I remember as a kid being like, do not read to me, Mum, I don't want it anymore. But the times that she did, I was like, yes, I'm loving this, So yes, it's definitely for adults as well. And though I think it's more for parents to share with their kids.
Yeah, just another way to bond. My kids and I do that too. We've got books all over. We have a little room that we call the reading room, where we just sit on the couches and read whatever we want together. So I just love that.
Awesome. We used to have, we don't have it anymore. We used to have a room that we called the library. and it was basically just like wall to ceiling bookshelves of all my books, and my wife doesn't really read, so it's all my books, and every time we move, my wife is always like, are you seriously packing like 18 boxes of books? Like, just get rid of some of them. And we had this one place where we could fit it all in this one, room.
Yeah.
And so it was just amazing. We had a cat, like we would read in there. It was beautiful. But we've moved from there, and half of them are back in boxes, and I've got my little bookshelf now again. So yeah.
Yes, I did. I don't know, personal thing. Like, I love reading. My daughter's always loved reading, and my son, who's 12, just discovered the love of reading this summer.
Yep.
It just like hit, and now he loves it, and it makes me so happy. But my husband is not a big reader, but he's a triathlete, so sometimes he'll buy books about like how to swim better, like how to improve his swimming stroke. So every once in a while he'll come join us and like open that, and I'm like, hey, you know what? That's what teachers tell kids. Like, read what you're interested in.
It's a win. Yeah, I love it.
Read what you're interested in. Scott, I just thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We're huge fans of yours here at Red Wine and Blue, and thank you everybody for joining. We're just going to keep sharing these stories. We're going to keep sharing these books, and we're not going to be silenced. So keep up the incredible work, and definitely you're a friend of Red Wine and Blue, so hopefully we can do more together. So
thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, and hopefully we can talk again sometime.
Yeah, great. All right, bye everybody.
See ya. Bye.